Hello, hello. Welcome back. Welcome to the Strides and Vibes podcast, live from Girona in Spain and Sydney in Down Under, Australia. I am very, very happy to have a lovely guest on today. As you can see, Kristen Arnold is her name. She's a former professional cyclist. She's an accredited dietitian. She's the lead dietitian at Eternal Company in the US and a specialist dietitian for the EF Education Oatly Women's Pro Cycling Team. There you go. I got that one out. I'm very, very happy with that.
Great job.
She's a performance nutrition specialist and focuses on women in elite sport, obviously, with her background as a former professional cyclist. Kristen, thank you for coming on. Welcome to the Strides
Yeah,
and
thanks
Vibes
for having
podcast.
me. Super happy to be here.
Right. Let's get into it straight away. What makes you you, Kristen?
Yeah, thanks Mario for asking this question because it did make me think, and I always appreciate the opportunity to do some self-reflection. So I was like, what does make me me? And I would say one, I'm very passionate about what I do. My career definitely shapes a lot of the trajectory of my life. So sports nutrition would be number one. Generally being active. So I did race professionally in the US and Canada, but now I still ride bikes. I am running a lot more now, and then I also play volleyball and I weight lift. So generally just engaging in an active lifestyle. And I also like to tell people that I'm a tinned fish and tinned aficionado. So I love tinned fish. I am an advocate of them, and definitely shapes the way that I look for things when I'm traveling and bring joy to my life.
So what's a tin fish? Explain that a little bit more.
Really, any kind of seafood or fish in a tin. It's really that simple, but it I mean, all over the world, they have different products available, and it's fun to go to different countries and try different things, but generally, they're shelf stable, they're incredibly nutrient dense, they are generally not very expensive, so there is a wide range. There are very fancy tinned fish. Right now, I'm in Spain, and so they have tapas, and there's a lot of really nice tinned fish around, so I'm excited to try those.
Definitely back in my um, non-vegan days, and we're not going to talk about this, but I certainly follow that path as well. It stills your hunger very quickly. Sardines, you've done something good for your body, no doubt at all. Absolutely, I couldn't agree more. But it's been a while now. I've got a lot of stories, but I agree. In Spain, I've been in Spain for a long time. I worked there for a long time, and the seafood and the fish culture is just perfect. It's fresh, but I think that's a good point. So a lot of people who are listening in, they might say, hey, all right, not expensive, nutritious, healthy, gives me energy. Bang. So we've already got the first nugget out of the way. Absolutely perfect there. So you touched on this a little bit already, but how did a professional cyclist become a performance dietitian? Because obviously I understand as a cyclist or a elite performer, you soon understand probably what goes in gives me energy, but to become a performance dietitian is obviously another step further. So how did that happen?
Mhm. So I did pursue nutrition essentially while I was pursuing professional cycling. So my journey was out of high school in the US. A lot of young kids go to college. I went to college for nutrition to become a registered dietitian. While I was in my undergraduate, I found cycling and instantly fell in love with it, made a really fast community, ended up racing for the collegiate club team, and then it just took off from there. So I had my RD, I was pursuing my master's degree when I started racing domestically, and then by the end of my master's degree, I was racing for a domestic elite team in the US. So it was in tandem, but I didn't really start my nutrition profession until maybe 3/4 of the way through my professional cycling career when I was taking on private clients and doing more educational talks. So it was at the same time, but I was incredibly informed, not only from my personal experience working um, as an athlete, but also focusing on my nutrition and then being around different teams and environments to get the context as well.
Very good. So what did you learn? Looking back, what lessons from your cycling career still influence your work now? You said parallel to cycling, you started or you studied and then you started getting clients on. Um, so what lessons did you learn from that? What you bring in now? I mean, we
Yeah,
learn
I
every day. I understand, of course. Yeah.
mhm. So cycling for people that are unfamiliar is a very high volume sport. So you can be on the bike anywhere from 12 hours a week to 30 hours a week. And it essentially just takes a lot of time. The body can handle the load better than an impact sport like running or a team sport. So it really just demands a lot of calories, a lot of time. And so I think training full time really taught me what it feels like in my body and in my mind to push that hard day after day after day. And um, and I have to remind myself of that now because I'm not exercising at that level anymore. And so I have more capacity to do work or read other journal articles or do engagements like this. But there are lots of athletes that have full time jobs, they have families, and they're trying to train full time. And so having the context of understanding, like, how do you really push yourself in a way that is being productive, but also that you can support yourself through all of your commitments?
That's excellent advice, actually, because I know a lot of listeners, and some of them I even know personally. They're on this full time job. Most of the listeners are runners. I have cyclists who listen in, and hopefully, after this episode, we'll have millions of cyclists listening in. Um, that's how confident we are. I uh, I think, yeah, full time job. It's all these external stresses that we have. So if you're a professional athlete, I've never been one. I can imagine, okay, you've got that to look after. You have to look after your body and you've got, recovery and whatever else, which we'll go into a little bit more deeper later on. But most people listening in will run, I don't know, train between 10 and 20 hours a week, probably, from a running perspective. And I call it training. Everything's like you said, weightlifting, whatever we do is training. As soon as we start stressing the body, that's classed as training. So many people think, oh, if I go to the sauna, that's not stressing the body. It bloody for me it is, right? I say to my athletes, if you go to the sauna, it's like a 10K run. If you go 45, 50 minutes or an hour to the sauna. So this is a very good point, that we need to support everything that we do in life with whatever we do, recovery, eating, and so on. What's the biggest misconception, like recreational athletes like myself would have about elite cyclists? Let's go, because I come from a country where cycling has always been big. Switzerland. I know in Australia as well. We've got a few good athletes. I know there's a Swiss lady in the team at EF Pro Cycling. I had a look, Noemi, and yeah. So what's the biggest misconception?
Yeah, I think a lot of people that I work with, and I work with a lot of amateur athletes as well. I do work with EF Pro Cycling, but the majority of the athletes I work with in my private practice are amateur. Some of them are quite high performing, but still at that level where they're supporting themselves financially and all that. Um, but the biggest misconception is that they're doing something super different or high level compared to an amateur, and it's really not that way. When I joined EF Pro Cycling and we have a nutrition handbook that we use for our department, I mean, it really was just standard guidelines that I provide to any athlete, and really what they're doing is they're getting the basics dialed. Something that the department head of nutrition said to the riders at this most recent or the team camp at the beginning of the season is that they want all the riders to get 80% of things right 100% of the time. And I really liked that because it's not about getting 100% of things right, 20% of the time leading into race day. It's about doing most things right all the time. And so that's really what it is. It's eating balanced meals, it's finding the foods that work for them, it's being really consistent in how they're getting their fuel, and ultimately setting themselves up for success to do those habits over and over and over again and not forget some days or not have backup options. So I think the biggest misconception is just that they're doing something radically different. And really they're just doing the normal boring things just really consistently.
Magic. There's no magic pill, is there? It's
Mhm.
a lot of hard work. I get asked a lot, what's one magic workout to become a better runner or a better endurance athlete? That says exactly what you say. The boring stuff every single day. I mean, I even say, good runners are made when no one's watching. That's what I usually go by, and but I love that. That's awesome. Yeah. 80-20, do the 80%, 100% right. And it's that word consistency again. I think that's what it is. You watch, we only see on TV, what do we see? We see them perform. We don't know, I mean, Netflix has had a series of going in with the teams a little bit now. There's been 2 or 3 seasons of the Tour de France with different teams. So that's been really fantastic, of course. What surprised you most when you got into this world tour extravaganza, let's call it like that, when you were used to obviously the USA and Canada and the professionalism there? So what surprised you most when you got into this whole Tour de France, Giro d'Italia, Vuelta, and what they're all called, these tours? What was that?
Yeah, I mean, so previous to working with EF, I also was after I retired from racing, I became a team sport director, which is essentially the coach. If anyone on the listening to the podcast has seen the Netflix special, it's the person like on the radio in the car telling the riders what to do. So
Ah,
I was
okay.
doing that. Um, and I was primarily working for the national team for USA Cycling. So I had the experience of being at some of the higher level races, not quite world tour, but we would have 3 staff members at a race. And now being at the world tour and a grand tour, I mean, we'll have up to 15, up to 20 staff members for one team at one race. So the thing that I wasn't necessarily surprised at the end, but at the beginning, I was just really impressed at the level of attention to detail, how much genuine care the staff members have for the riders and setting them up for success and doing the best possible job they could. So it's really about maintaining not only the performance, but also the health and the well-being of the riders. And I was really happy and inspired to see that.
That's just a personal question now for me, because it's, as you're speaking, it's like, how much attention is given to mental well-being to these elite athletes?
Yeah, I think every team operates differently. We all have our own ecosystem. Within EF Pro Cycling, we partner with a company called Changing Minds, and it's a British company made up of therapists and performance psychologists. And we do all kinds of things with them. We do personality uh, assessments to help the teams work together in a high pressure performance based environment, but also helping the riders individually to improve performance of whatever they need. So understanding each other better and then how we can better work as a group. So there is quite a bit of support provided for riders on our team as far as that goes. And one of the reasons I was brought on to the team is because I have more experience and expertise in understanding how to navigate relationships with food, relationships with body, and ultimately plug in to work with other practitioners in that way.
Thank you. Yeah, that's I find that very important. I mean, look, as a coach, loving coaching, I've been coaching for many, many years. It's this human first, athlete first approach. At my little team, Healthetica Coaching, we have a community call once a month. I bring all my athletes on and also my other coach, Sophie Garrity, and people can just open up, and say, okay. And it was actually interesting. Yesterday, we had the subject of the post-race blues or the post-marathon blues, and how do we all recover? Do we need another big thing? And we're all amateurs, total amateurs, age groupers. And it was interesting to see how everybody operates in the crowd. So, yeah, I find that for me, the mental whole aspect. I mean, as an ultra runner, it's very comparable to obviously a multi-day event. I've been part of multi-day events, 500-kilometer running events and stuff like that as like the coach and the crew. So I find that very, very important. I mean, and what surprises me though is that they do an assessment. So like a DISC assessment or something like that. So
I
they call
think
it the
they
DISC
created their
assessment or whatever.
own. Yeah, I'm not actually sure about the actual testing assessment, but I'm quite confident that they created it internally for their group.
Look, we don't want to talk too much about that. I do apologize, but for me, the mental aspect of everything is so important. Um, all right, let's talk a little bit about fueling performance, and then we veer across and talk about women in elite sport. So, what's the difference between eating for health and eating for performance? Just simplified, because that's a question everybody asks. What would be your answer, Kristen?
Yeah, simplified, I would say that eating for health is a lot of people that eat for health in my practice. They come to me, I look at some food records and they eat incredibly high quality food, right? Lots of fresh fruits and vegetables, whole grains, lean proteins, healthy fats. And there's more of an emphasis on the food types themselves and the quality, but not as much of a focus on the quantity, right? So fueling has a lot to do with timing around exercise and throughout the day, and then also the quantity of when you're having those foods. So, you can do both, of course, and I always recommend that we eat for health and we eat for performance, and then we also eat for pleasure. So that's another really important aspect and really being like the whole athlete, like you mentioned, and a human is balancing those three. So sometimes we need to eat foods that are really high quality to support our body's function. Sometimes we need to eat to support our training and performance, and sometimes we need to enjoy company and enjoy the experience and the foods and the opportunities we're given.
Soul food, Kristen, we call it. Huh? Awesome. Yeah, I love that. That is, yeah, it's so important. Again, we're probably 80-20. Uh, so I have to talk about carbohydrates. It wouldn't be a show or a podcast on nutrition and recovery. Why are endurance athletes still so afraid of carbohydrates? What do you think? What's happened?
Yeah, this is a good question. In cycling, a couple things. One, there is a ton of research on sports nutrition strategies for cycling because it's a relatively easy modality to study, right? You can put anyone on a treadmill, or not a treadmill, like a stationary bike and do testing. And so we're special and fortunate in that way that we have a lot of research on cycling nutrition. I would say running is a close second as far as the sports nutrition research that exists. Running would be the second because, again, you can put people on a treadmill. Um, but that being said, there are quite a few cultural differences. So in cycling, there's a huge emphasis on carbohydrates, and frankly, my job in the last 5 years has gotten way easier because the media and some of the research is catching up, just showing how important carbohydrates are. So it's more accepted in the community of cyclists that we need to eat carbs, especially during training. For running, I do feel like the running community is still catching up to that, and I think we'll get there in a few years. There's definitely some ultra athletes that are pushing the boundaries, and like David Roche, for example.
Yes, we know him
Um,
well.
yeah, 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 and he lives actually in Fort Collins where I live, or he lives in that area of Fort Collins where I live. So, Colorado, but so there's some ways that the running culture is changing around fueling and needing carbs, but we're still not quite there. But I do see quite a few athletes scared of carbs because they're worried about putting on excess weight. And this is another part of the cultural puzzle, right? So understanding not what your body can do and how it's functioning, but rather what it looks like as a way to measure success. And so that's the misconception. And that's the fear that we really need to work past as a running and cycling and endurance community.
I mean, they do say cycling is always a little bit ahead of running in terms of technology. And with that technology also comes what the body goes through and so on. I don't know the number anymore. I know with my coach, we speak every week about general because we both coach at a club, but we both run our own coaching business as such with our athletes, and it's always interesting to see. Yeah, yeah. You've mentioned David Roach. Everybody in the ultra running world knows David Roach. I didn't realize he lived close to you. So probably he'll be running the look, he's an absolute machine. If he can pump down 120 carbs an hour, then for me, that's already, I can't even fathom that. But the way it's good, it works for him. We're working on about 80, 85 with some of my athletes because running and cycling is completely different. And that's definitely something I would like to touch on as well in this podcast. So obviously we don't even need to talk about the biggest mistakes that are being made. I would suggest underfueling with carbs would be probably number one. Um, I know that athletes do undereat while they still think they're having enough. So I actually, for one, did a resting metabolic rate test 2 months ago, and that tells me the number of what I need to eat to survive. So if I would sit on the couch all day, that number, and then the rest is obviously my activities and so on. And the reason I do these things is obviously I'm not the one who knows everything, but at least I can talk to my athletes and say, look, do you realize actually that you need to eat 1,800 calories just to survive every day? If you would cut down every day after a year, you might be dead. We don't know, right? It's like that's just how the body works. But you know a lot more about this, obviously. One thing, so you just said in the last 10 years, the cyclists have understood that carbohydrate is probably the way to go. So what happened in them 10 years since you've been on the road and you've been cycling? What was the biggest change?
There's a couple contributing factors. So one of them was that we did think that the body could only oxidize so many carbs per hour. So we thought there was a maximum of about 90 grams of carb per hour. And that was even if you took in more than that, the body isn't doing anything with it. Or rather, it's not doing anything with it for performance in that moment. It'll store it as fat or use it later. But now we know that endurance athletes can oxidize over 120 grams of carb per hour. So some of the research has changed in that way. And I think also certain athletes like David Roche and some of the World Tour teams, it is getting more accepted in the media. Okay, the pros are doing this, therefore, like, the rest of us can catch up as well. And so, part of it's cultural with positive influences from professional athletes, and then part of it is also the research.
Perfect. I mean, research is always good. And again, road running, cycling has a lot more research than ultra running and trail running because the terrain is just different. And I know you're coaching on nutrition and diet some athletes that'll be going to my favorite race in a couple of weeks, the Western States. So let's just briefly touch on that because I'm personally interested. Of course, we're mentioning David Roach again. There's others. There's some high fat, low carb guys out there as well. You know, three people come to mind. We don't need to ramble them all on. People will know who they are. Um, yes, he runs 330 pace, right? 315s kilometer, metric system. I don't. Do I still need to do 120 grams or not? Because these guys run I mean, 100-mile event now is like a marathon 20 years ago, right? Let's be honest. They run 100 miles. They treat it like a marathon. These guys are off. The gun goes off. These guys are already around the corner. And, people like me are still kind of looking where my poles are going to go. It's crazy. So the intensity they run at, yes, probably 120 works. But for me and mortals like me, I would probably be in that bracket again in terms of not oxidizing at all. Would I be correct in assuming that?
Yeah, there's a few things going on. So, when I'm working with a runner, first off, we're looking at what are the demands of the event, right? So 100 miles, even for someone that's quite fast, it's still going to take them 10 hours plus, right? And so at some point, you're more up against a calorie energy wall than you are specifically carbs. But carbohydrates are going to be the main fuel source that your body is burning during the activity. So usually I'll counsel people to focus on making sure they're getting 3 to 450 calories per hour, but that at least um, that would include at least 60 grams of carbohydrate per hour. And so that will meet both needs no matter how fast or less fast that you're running. So that's across the board. Somebody like David Roach or some of the pros that are training and racing in that really high intensity bracket for long periods of time, they can oxidize more carbohydrates. And that's primarily influenced by gut training more than how many calories they're actually burning per hour. So, I mean, even if you're running 4 mile, I'm gonna go miles because I'm more familiar
It's
with
okay.
it.
No problem.
um, 4 miles per hour, you're still burning at least 400 calories. That would be a minimum 400 calories per hour, even if you're in a small body, right? The metrics of how many calories you're burning per hour are based on your speed, but also your body weight. People in bigger bodies are going to burn more calories. They need to eat more calories. But at the end of the day, it's about fueling the demands of the event, but also what you have trained your body to be able to handle in those moments. So other important factors would be like heat, altitude, race nerves. That's a big one. People can have this perfect fueling plan that they do in their, 60K training run, but then they get to a race and everything starts to go down the wrong end. And so, understanding how race nerves and being in that environment will influence the fueling strategies as well.
Race day anxiety. I'm telling you, I can write a book about it. In all honesty, I had 2 years and I ran probably 5 races or something. Combined, I slept 4.5 hours across the 5 races the night before. So I've kind of not, I wouldn't say I fixed it. It's still there, but I was like awake all night. And there was races where I had to go through 2 nights because there was like evening starts and stuff like that. So you can just add another sleepless night. Luckily, I finished them all and I did pretty well. But yeah, it's a thing. And yeah, I see that in a lot of runners. They have that perfect plan. They've spent money on a dietitian or a nutritionist, or I work with them. I do a spreadsheet because I'm allowed to build a nutrition plan for race day. Obviously, not everyday health. That's a different story. I don't step over that line. And then, yeah, during the day. But I've just had 3 people run a 100-miler, and with everybody, I said, have a plan A, B, C, D, E in terms of nutrition. You cannot just go with plan A. What's your thought on something like that?
I also agree that it's necessary. So, yeah, you have your perfect plan, and then you have backup foods, you have backup types of fluids you're taking in. You have to adjust like your pacing strategy, which will influence all those pieces. You brought up another good point that sleep deprivation or lack of sleep will also influence your body's ability to take in food. So that's something to consider. And really, it's you do everything you can to prepare going in, and then you embrace the moment once you're there.
Very good advice. Thank you very much. I think there's some good takeaways here for this. I mean, nutrition is a big thing. It's my hobby as well since I've been on my weight loss journey a few years ago, and my life is around what can I eat to be better, to perform better, and so on. And it's only in a very small way. So having a professional in my podcast now talking about it, and yeah, there's a lot of learnings here. All right. Let's move on to women in sport. So for me, it's very, very important that people understand that, of course, we know women are not small men. That's also how we treat them or should treat them in terms of performance. But before I start telling you what I think, it's absolutely irrelevant. What's the biggest difference in terms of endurance sports nutrition for women and men in your eyes?
Um, some of the biggest differences are just understanding the personalization that's required. Like there are recommendations in scientific theory and some studies showing that eating certain ways around the menstrual cycle will be impactful and important. And those for a lot of athletes is very important. But ultimately, we use those recommendations to inform more personalized approaches because you'll have athletes that have a menstrual cycle, they don't take birth control, they have regular periods, but there's also athletes that don't have a period, and that's something that's really important to keep aware of as sports medicine professionals, practitioners, and coaches is that because female athletes, people born with female reproductive organs, have the capacity to have a menstrual cycle. It's a really helpful litmus test to see where's the health and function of their bodies. So we have that. And I would say also there's some cultural differences as well. So I think fortunately the communities of cycling and running were understanding that there are differences in body composition, body fat, and that lighter is not necessarily faster, but I think there's still some misconceptions with this. And ultimately, I think what we really need to do as endurance communities and practitioners is help women embrace the bodies that they're in rather than trying to strive for a body they think they should have. And ultimately, that will lead to better eating habits, better training habits when they're appreciating and accepting their bodies for what they are rather than what they think they should be.
Such a hard thing to do, I mean, I'm a bloke and I have that problem or have that problem sometimes, and I have to be. You know, we all want to fit into something smaller than we're wearing at the moment, and I think that goes for women and men. But uh, it's very interesting, or interesting. It's important to realize that around the menstrual cycle, if there is one, food can be adjusted to suit whatever, there's certain parts in the menstrual cycle that women can perform better than not. Sometimes the timing is off. That's why I'm always amazed how good women do perform, at the Olympics and stuff. You can't time it like perfect. It's like it is what it is. And for blokes, it's a lot easier. That's, um, I imagine the conversation you're having with people and in these two communities, like you say, it's a cultural thing, cycling and running and so on. Where do you think the understanding is a little bit better? I know you might be biased although I don't think so, because you know both parts. Where do you think the conversation is freer?
That's a great question. I do think in cycling, there is becoming a better understanding of like stronger and having more muscle mass, for example, or even more body fat can help to improve performance. both long term and short term. So a lot of the time we know, yes, you can be in a really small body and potentially perform for a month, for half a season, but then those athletes tend to blow up and have injuries and all kinds of hormonal issues and things. But we now know both on the men's and the women's side that when some certain athletes put on more muscle mass and they are objectively like 1 or 2 kilos, maybe even 3 kilos heavier, they also perform better, even up hills, even in a watts per kilo or a stride per kilo capacity. So I do think that's improving, and I would say that's also true to a certain extent in running, but from my view, there's still some room for improvement there.
Excellent. Good. And I think this is also about awareness, you know. Uh, Many people know that have been listening. This is a totally unsponsored podcast. Um, the reason is I can say what I want then, which is great. But people do see some things in the background. I have a gifted collaboration with Keen, which is a shoe brand in the US, and I'm very happy to mention them. They've gifted us some shoes, and because they're not very well known in the running sphere just yet, they're a hiking shoe, and of course I'm an affiliate with Currents. There's a podcast coming out soon as well, which is a black currants pill made of I think 83 black currants, and it just helps blood flow and recovery and stuff like that. Also very well scientifically checked and proven and researched, otherwise it wouldn't go into my body. So I'm not advertising, I'm just saying a huge thank you to some who offer to help us out this little, but there's no money ever being exchanged. So this is why we can talk freely where we need to change things. And talking about it is the most important part. And I think that's where you picked up on my podcast as well. Power Women on the Run. I think you came across that when we spoke about safety for female runners and how they get the training done and stuff like that. Yeah. Uh, so what do female athletes need that historically hasn't been spoken about?
I think so in the sports medicine practitioner community, we do understand that one, not having a period is something that needs to be addressed. It's not like a normal part of being an endurance athlete. And I do think that in the sports community, this is accepted, but not in general population. Tons of my athletes, they go to their general practitioner in the US, and they get blood work done. They tell their doctor they don't have a period, and the doctor says something like, "Oh, that's normal for an endurance athlete." That's very, very common. Or they'll have blood work that doesn't show there's anything clinically significant, like that will lead to long-term health disease risk, but that there are clearly some metabolic or nutritional deficiencies going on. So the sensitivity to certain values is not there, and understanding the context of an endurance athlete. So, yeah, just making sure that athletes and runners have a community or have a support system in place that understands them as endurance athletes is super, super important because really the general population and all the training that doctors and other practitioners need to go through don't necessarily focus on this very small population when it, is get in context of everyone else in the world.
That's a good point, I have to say. That's, yeah, thanks a lot. That's important. Hopefully, the listeners listening in. That's again, that relationship between a coach and a female athlete, I can imagine, um, has to go deep sometimes, where you're like, okay, we need to have the understanding of what people are going through. So what, I mean, this is just stupid me now asking, what's the effect of having a normal menstrual cycle on performance and not having one? Is there a percentage of saying, look, if you do, what's the selling point? Let's say from a coaching perspective, as I say, let's do everything we can so that everything functions normally because you will perform better longer. Am I on the right track here?
Mhm. Yeah. So, again, you would need to not be on some kind of hormonal birth control to know if you have a menstrual cycle. So even if you're on a oral contraceptive and you bleed once a month, that's called a withdrawal bleed. That's not because your body is going through a menstrual period. It's just because for those however many days, you're not taking oral hormones contraceptives. And also is true for something like an IUD, an intrauterine device. And so sometimes people will have a bleed, but that's called a breakthrough bleed. It doesn't mean that the body is going through hormonal changes. It just means that, I mean, as far as we understand right now, it's just kind of something that randomly happens occasionally. So we do need to not be on any kind of contraceptive to know. And then one of the main things that happens when we are underfueled or doing too much training, and one of the first systems to shut down is the reproductive system, right? In the context of survival, reproduction is not a high priority for our bodies, right? Preserving organ function and a lot of other functions is gonna be a higher priority. And so the body compensates, and one of the first things it does is it starts to downregulate the production of estrogen. And estrogen is a hormone that's incredibly valuable for athletes. It helps to maximize carbohydrate availability. But one of the main ways for health is it's protective of bones and it helps to maintain and also increase bone density. And so over time, if your body isn't producing enough estrogen, it will start to downregulate the health and capacity of your bones. And that can lead to things like stress fractures, um, osteopenia, osteoporosis, and so that's one of the main ways it's really, really important. If we don't have a period, we know our bodies aren't getting enough estrogen and therefore our bone density will be compromised.
I had to snigger there because I'm in the bracket of osteopenia and
Mhm.
osteoporosis, as we discussed when we first met. And that's also why I'm in the gym. And I've just learned through my latest certification that, yeah, estrogen also for men is important, but we're not talking about men, but men produce that as well. Probably not enough in my case. Um, you know, yeah, that's awesome advice. That's just having that understanding of the human body. The reason I became a running coach is obviously I always wanted to be a running coach because I loved running when I started running, whatever, 17 years ago. But I became a personal trainer first. So you kind of learn the anatomy of the human body first, and then you can somehow start putting on. I'm a mechanical engineer by trade. So having that understanding of how a body moves and how a body functions. There's a lot of electrical and mechanical functions that happen in the body, which is very good translatable to the outside world of whatever practice one does anyway, yeah. Um, you've already hit on the lighter is faster. This weight to power ratio in cycling, which is easily measured. We're going through a phase in running, as you know, where, we want to try and put technology in, but then at the end of the day, in my game, ultra running, it's all about rate of perceived exertion rather than measuring everything. The feedback I get from my athletes is more valuable than all the numbers I can get through all the technology we have now with watches and heart rate monitors and whatever foot pods and God knows what. But what excites you most about the future of women's sport? Just talking about it now. We've spoken about history. Looking forward, what excites you most, Kristen?
Yeah, I think the definitely what's exciting me most is the um investment in the professional sports of women, right? Like there's more football and soccer teams and handball teams and cycling teams and even professional runners are getting more endorsements and so I do believe there will be a trickle down um uh, phenomenon where as we have more professional opportunities in all of these sports, that will allow young girls to see, oh, I could actually be a professional basketball player or a professional runner. And that will open up more opportunities for development at younger years as well. And so ultimately, just more girls, more women doing sports, both recreationally and at the professional level, and just seeing how that trickles down.
I'm excited as well because that's the program I'm working on at the moment, especially with younger athletes, mainly females. I've come up with a bit of an idea at Healthetica Coaching called Healthetica Rising. So it's part of we can't stop people wanting to run ultra marathons at a young age, but I've built a program, an educational program, together with my coach. Uh, Coaches with me, Sophie, to kind of educate people, say, hey, we're not going to stop you from doing it. You're going to do it. But yeah, I just read an article this morning. A Swiss ice hockey player, she's moved to the US, and she said exactly that. She's moved from one team to another because she said, luckily, I am now in an environment where this is becoming a business as well, not just in the men's ice hockey field. We had the Soccer World Cup here for women 2, 3 years ago, something like that. And I went to one or two games. Unbelievable. Everything was sold out. 80, 90,000 people. Fantastic. Brilliant. That begs one question. Uh, Females, they go through school, they do a bit of sport, and then there's a period where they kind of stop for various reasons, and then it's quite hard for them to pick it back up again. This is something I touched on with a podcast with Chantel and Sophie a while back. So, how do we prevent this from happening? How do we keep these girls driven, saying, okay, come on, let's just keep going? I know school is important and college and homework and all this kind of stuff, and boys come into the game and whatever else there is. Um, how do you see this? How can we prevent this?
I think just at the end of the day, a lot of how can we do blank is setting up an environment for people to be successful. So, same as I was saying about embracing and accepting and appreciating the bodies we're in. If everyone appreciated the body they were in and was less focused on comparing, then it wouldn't be that way, right? But we live in a society that encourages us to compare even our past selves to our current selves or other athletes to ourselves. So same thing with girls. If their moms, if their moms' friends, if their teachers, if the people in their lives are generally active and talking about the activities they're doing, and it's just kind of a part of the culture to do some kind of sport, I think that it would be way more likely that they would. So essentially, it's more of all of us engaging in sports and activities that make us happy, but also are good for our health and overall well being.
Fantastic. Yeah, that's a great answer. Exactly. It's like surround yourself with the right people. All right, talking about longevity, we've just looked into the future a little bit. Um, I think so, but what do you think? Is recovery really where the difference is made nowadays?
Mm, yeah, that's a great question. I like to brag about nutrition for
Do
recovery
it.
because, yeah, so in sports physiology, exercise science, there's the 4 R's of recovery. There's repair, refuel, rehydrate, and rest. And so 3, arguably 4 of the 3 of them are definitely nutrition related. Carbohydrates for refueling, fluids for rehydrating, protein for repairing, but even sleep has a big nutrition has a big component of sleep. So if you think about it, recovery is really at least 90% nutrition. And I think this is especially true for runners if you're running at a lower volume. There's not as much of an emphasis on like during exercise fueling, if you're only running for 1 hour, for example, per day. And so ultimately, that requires a lot more attention to recovery and the time around exercise. That being said, I would say the most common mistakes that I see my runners making is they're not eating enough before training. Um, and depending on how long their training session is during the training. But the before training, I would say 9 out of 10 runners at every level, amateur to pro, are definitely not eating enough before exercise, fueling, and ultimately that will impact their recovery. If they're training in a state that's underfueled, that will take more time and capacity for their bodies to recover for the next training session.
I have that discussion with all my women athletes. I'm not letting any of them go without eating before I run. End of story.
Mhm.
It's like I'm not even going into enough detail with them. I says, look, it's just how you as a female human being functions, and the same goes also the recovery meal after the run. I think the women's window is a lot shorter than the men's window. Is that correct in your eyes as well? Talking about
Yes,
refueling.
I would say it's more important for females, people with female reproductive organs, but it will be just as valuable, right? So it would be just as valuable, but the margin for error is smaller in female athletes.
So they have that 20 to 30 minute window, I think, post run where, yeah, yeah. I mean, I have my shape. Look, it's easy, and I had that discussion with. We had another nutritionist on, um, Lisa Sherman.
Mhm.
She's quite, yeah, well known in Australia and a personal accomplice of mine, fellow ultra runner, and so on. And we had that discussion as well, off and on. There, it's like that this whole recovery is so important, and just how easy is it? You go to the trailhead in the car and you have a little freezer bag and you have your shake in there and you just get back in the car and like it's like putting the shoes there. It's the same thing. So, oh, I forgot to refuel and I forgot. And, I have runners who just forget to take
Mhm.
the supplements they need to take, which is like, some of us are over 50 now. We need to look after our body a little bit more than we used to. And especially with all the little ailments that we have. Yeah. Awesome. Um, so how can us everyday runners recover faster or better? What would be your tip? We don't have that obviously network. We can look after ourselves. What's a few tricks?
I think the main focus should really be, fueling for the work required, right? So a lot of athletes I work with, they're eating the same thing every single day. Maybe they eat a little bit more on their long run days, but a day off looks essentially the same as a day when they're doing like a 10K, 15K run, right? And a 10K, 15K run will effectively require anywhere from 500 to 1,000 extra calories in the day. So if you're eating the same every day, you're very likely to miss out. And so, something that people can do consistently is just incorporating foods that work for them post training, and that will help to fill some of that gap, but also understanding like when are they training, and what do they need to do in that context, right? I'm not telling an athlete that trains at 5 a.m. to eat a meal 3 hours before at 2 a.m. Like that's not a practical strategy. But maybe if you're training first thing when you wake up, you have drink mix in your bottle that you take with you during the training session, or you have a few dates or half a banana or something before. It could be that easy. But just understanding like what are some habits that you can do to set yourself up for success consistently rather than having a mindset of just trying harder. It's more about how can you make your life easier to get what you need.
Just gold. It's like, yeah. I mean, what I used to do in this case when I didn't know anything? I used to have some porridge before I went to bed, knowing that in the morning I used to have a lot of stomach problem in the beginning, like everybody, until you really, a bit more, until you're a little bit more dialed in. I just had like a one of those quick oats, 100 calories or 150 calories before I went to bed. And then I was trying to say, okay, then I don't need to eat anything in the morning. Obviously, I've changed that approach a little bit. I would still eat something now, just to make sure that I'm already replenished and stuff. But yeah, this is really good. This is really good advice. Yeah, and simple again. Back to where we were in the beginning of the podcast. Most things are just simple. Probably when you watch the Netflix thing about the Tour de France where they follow the teams. If you look at the breakfast they have, it's cereal, porridge, bread, butter, jam, Nutella, peanut butter, just stuff that we all need and we can all have in our cupboard, really, right? Nothing fancy. Yeah, I mean, you can do an overnight oats and have some fancy things, but if we're time poor, this is fantastic advice. What's the most overrated nutrition trend at the moment, Kristen?
So I was thinking about this question ahead of time. And for cycling, it's ketones.
Oh yeah.
There's a big trend taking ketones before, during, or after training, and there's a review article that just came out effectively saying that there are potentially some benefits, but all the research we have currently is so mixed, it's really not recommended in any context. The only time it might be recommended is in the potential for overtraining, but even in that context, if you are fueling well, you wouldn't need to worry about using ketones.
Yep, I see the same one. That's another
In
one.
running,
Question, is overtraining even possible, or is it just under recovery? Which side of the fence are you on? The overtrained or the under recovered?
Um, that's a that is a good question. I mean, so we do know there's a difference between low energy availability or not eating enough calories and overtraining. They manifest in different signs, different symptoms. Their blood work will look different. Their training capacity will look different. We don't completely understand exactly what's going on physiologically between the two, but we know that there is a distinct difference between them. Um, and so, yeah, I mean, yes, you could say it's one of the same if you're overtraining or under recovering. I would say culturally, the most common mistake I see athletes taking is they're doing too much every day and not enough periodization throughout the week, like taking full rest days or at least minimum active recovery days, and then really hitting their hard training sessions hard. Um, and so that just doesn't allow the time and capacity for the body to adapt properly and actually make training gains. It's just they're consistently doing high volume training, and it'll take much longer to see improvements.
Hanging around in that zone three, I always say, 5 heart rate zones, every run, every bike ride, slow or fast, is always in zone three, top or bottom.
Mhm.
So they're never in zone one and two to recover actively, and they never hit it hard in zone four and five to actually get those gains that you just said. So just a couple of more questions before we hit the quick fire round. Uh, Best advice for masters athletes like myself and most of my runners and my colleagues. What would you suggest?
Definitely, yeah, focusing on 2 things. One, the needs of your nutrition needs around training become even more important. So there's quite a bit of research showing if we're not well fueled before and during training, that will lead to a higher risk of injury. And as a masters athlete, it objectively will likely take you longer to recover from an injury, right? So really it comes down to the prevention, and it's not doing anything differently, it's just doing the things we know to be important even more consistently, right? And, I would say number 2 is if and when you're getting to an age range where you are potentially seeing elevated lipids, abnormal blood work, things like this, focusing on incorporating fiber-rich foods and foods that are high in polyphenols and antioxidant can help to manage that chronic disease risk. Even as runners, even as endurance athletes, I see a lot of blood panels, that have elevated lipids, and so making sure the quality of your food is there as well.
So, okay. So that's just an in-betweeny question here. I mean, everybody, listen to this. This is very important. Getting injured is crap anyway. As we age, it's even worse because it takes forever, and that means the funny thing as well is I look at it with a bit of humor now. Most of us are also married or whatever, and as we don't run, we get really grumpy at home, right? So we'd rather not be injured and go out running and be a better husband, father, friend, girlfriend, whatever we are. in this world. So I think that's an important part. So last but not least, then I think um, a tip for the female athletes out there, Kristen, best advice.
Yeah, tip for female athletes, I would say, like I said, I really wanna emphasize because I see this becoming more important. I'm not sure how Australia is doing, but in the US, things like Ozempic and GLP-1s are becoming even more common, even in the endurance community, and so I really just wanna emphasize that your body can be strong. It is best to like we want to cultivate an environment where people are appreciating and accepting the bodies that they're in. And your body is strong, it is powerful, it is capable of that. And when you appreciate your body, you are more likely to engage in the healthy and performance habits that are going to be helpful rather than feeling like you need to focus more because you want your body to look a certain way. So really what I want to say is just like do it for yourself, do it for the other women around you, right? Really have that appreciation. But also, understanding what your personalized needs are around your menstrual cycle or wherever you are in your life stage, right? So postmenopausal women, they don't have periods. So there is no menstrual cycle, but understanding that your needs may be different and reaching out to either resources or practitioners that can help you navigate that.
So do some of your athletes that come to you, they come with the blood work already? Or do you send them to get blood
Mhm.
work? Is that beneficial? So if you do see a dietitian or a nutritionist to have the blood work, I mean, I share all my blood work with my nutritionist, Lisa. I've also just had a visit to my endocrinologist. She went through all this stuff because we weren't sure 2 years ago about my bone mineral density and so on. So that's a benefit to you as well. You can help them a lot better. Or you see markers where you say, hold on, maybe keep an eye on that. Okay.
Yeah, yeah, I like to meet athletes where they are. So if somebody is coming to me with very low budget, they don't have the resources to get blood work done, I'm not going to tell them they need to do that. But if somebody does have the resources or the capacity, it's incredibly helpful and informative to the process. So usually I'll recommend people get blood work done at minimum once a year, ideally twice a year. But if they can't, that's okay as well. But it is incredibly informative, to all the recommendations and how we go forward.
Excellent. Yeah, I hear I wouldn't say we're lucky here, but through Medicare, the system, I think we can do two a year. And then
Mhm.
if the doctor says, look, I want some extra testing, normally that gets done as well at the same time, or at least that was for me because of this osteopenia. All right, before we close, a few quick fire questions. Coffee before training?
Absolutely. Yes, 100%.
Love it.
It helps
Excellent.
gets
Oh,
things moving, it's an incredibly valuable stimulant, there's a ton of research in the caffeine in coffee to be helpful, so yes, absolutely.
excellent. So I can stick to my double shot espresso every morning. And you're in a perfect world now. Spain, Italy, France. You're gonna have some good coffees there.
Mhm.
Excellent. So what's your favorite recovery meal other
If
than
I'm
tinned fish? What else is there?
Yeah, if I'm being fancy, I'll do, like a smoothie that I make with fresh fruit and usually spinach. I'll do soy milk, protein powder, or Greek yogurt. If I know I'm gonna be really busy that day, I'll add in extra honey and I'll add in some nut butters to give it some more calories and nutrients. But, that's like if I have the time and interest, I'll do that's my favorite. But otherwise, like, my standard go-to is rice with, a can of fish. It's just really easy and it gets the job done.
Perfect. Simplicity, yeah. What's the most misunderstood nutrient?
Yeah, this is a good question. I think sugar, honestly. I think, again, now we're in this culturally, we're understanding how important carbohydrates are before, during, and after training and throughout the day. But I still work with a lot of people that they see sugar as an enemy, right? Or as something that's going to lead to chronic disease to diabetes. And really, it's diabetes is much higher. You have a much higher risk based on your genetics rather than your eating or nutrition or your exercise habits. So, understanding that foods that include sugar are usually incredibly nutrient dense with other antioxidants, fiber like fruits. So, don't be afraid of sugar.
Excellent. Love it. Sports drink or real food? Both, huh? I thought
Yep.
so. Yeah. So, what's one thing? This is the last question now, and then I'll let you go. One thing every endurance athlete should stop doing today.
I think
Instead
just
of doing something extra, let's stop doing something. Let's twist it a bit.
yep. Um, Focusing too much on getting certain things perfect. It's more important to, like I said, get most things right most of the time than it is to dwell too much on individual timing or individual things being perfect.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Kristen, I hope you've enjoyed it as much as I have. This has been so informative. Um, I know talking about sugar, you're in a great place now in Europe. It's interesting. People are so lean and over there, and they have dessert every single day. In Italy, they eat cake for breakfast. So I really think we don't have to be scared of sugar. Um, we need to be scared of sitting too much. I'm not talking about the
Mm.
cycling part of sitting, but I think that's a bigger danger. I mean, I stand all day, every day. So for me, that's not an issue anymore. I've started that habit years ago and I find it quite nice. Even when I'm in meetings in the evening, I can just roll my foot on a hedgehog ball and nobody even notices. But yeah, it works. I haven't been doing it now because you got my full focus, of course. So thanks a lot, Kristen. Um, Folks, all of Kristen's contact details in terms of websites and where she can be found and so on, Instagram account, Facebook, whatever we can find, LinkedIn, I'll put in the show notes. And yeah, thank you so much.
Yes, thanks so much, Mario. I really enjoyed it. And as you mentioned, feel free to reach out with any nutrition questions you have. So you don't have to be paying me or working with me to use me as a resource. I want to be there for the endurance community overall.
Thank you so very much. We will certainly take advantage of this. I've already got someone in mind that will reach out to you. Thanks a lot, people. We're vibing out.